All right, let's go ahead and get things started. Thank you for those of you that were able to join us live on the webinar today. We certainly appreciate your time. My name is Kyle Lee, Senior Construction Solutions Specialist with ATG USA, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Autodesk Construction Solutions and why mechanical subcontractors need it. So again, Senior Construction Solutions Specialist here with ATG, been with ATG for about 8 years. And prior to that time, I spent about 12 years working in the electrical distribution industry. And now for today's webinar, I'm also joined by my friend and colleague from the Autodesk Construction Solutions team, Miss Lisa Stine. So Lisa, I'll give you just a moment to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. So as Kyle mentioned, I am part of the Autodesk Construction Solutions team. I've been at Autodesk for about 4 years now. Actually, I come from industry as well. I spent about 8 years in construction as a structural engineer working in the electric utility industry, and then made my way into software, where I was a sales executive for a bit and then was a technical solutions executive working in named accounts for several years, and am now the partner marketing manager with ACS. So really excited to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. All right, so as we get things started here, we want to start off with a couple of poll questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, and I'm going to launch those poll questions. So if you don't mind taking just a moment to answer these two questions, shouldn't take very long at all, but we'd certainly appreciate getting your feedback here. So our two poll questions are, the first one is, how are you currently managing project bids? And so this is going to be multiple choice. We have options of through spreadsheets, emails, using Bidboard Pro, or possibly utilizing another digital solution. And then our second poll question is going to be, how are you currently performing, how do you currently perform work in place tracking? And so again, we've got a couple options there. You can select from either manual processes, leveraging a tool called Assemble, or the possibility of leveraging other digital solutions as well. So we'll give everyone just a second to go ahead and get their responses submitted there, and we certainly appreciate that. Based on what we're seeing right now from the feedback, it looks like it's kind of on the first question about around how are you currently managing project bids. Looks like that's pretty well a 50-50 split between some teams utilizing spreadsheets and some teams say that they are utilizing other digital solutions. So again, thank you for your responses there. And then on the question around how do you currently perform work in place tracking, again, about another 50-50 split between manual processes for some teams and then other digital solutions that are being leveraged by other teams there. So thank you for those of you that were able to participate in the polls there. And we're going to go ahead and close that down right now. So, all right, team. So thank you so much again for going through the poll questions there with us. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our agenda today and some of the topics that we're going to be covering. So again, why do mechanical subcontractors need the Autodesk Construction Solutions? And today we're going to be talking about these 5 points that you can see on the screen right now. So again, the utilization of a clear single source of truth or common data environment, which is what CDE stands for right there. We see that that's very, very important to make sure that everyone is working in the same environment and obviously working off of the most current iteration of the project documentation and information there. So we'll be talking about that. Also, we want to talk a little bit about the ability to have controlled file sharing when leveraging the Autodesk Construction Solutions, and specifically Autodesk Build and the Autodesk Docs solutions there. Then we'll talk a little bit about the importance of having visibility into issues and issue responsibilities across the projects themselves. And then we're going to be talking with Lisa a little bit more about some of the additional Autodesk Construction Solution products. And so then we'll be talking about bid management, being able to manage your bids, and also to look at and kind of continue to maintain and understand your bid performance with the tool called Bidboard Pro. And then lastly, she'll be taking us through an overview and kind of a walkthrough demo of work in place tracking with Assemble. Okay, so got some really good information to share today, and really looking forward to the conversation that we'll be able to have here. Now, as we move through the conversation, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit those into the Q&A panel there. We'll do our best to continue to monitor the Q&A panel, and some of those questions we may be able to answer during the course of the webinar, and some of those we will try to save some time so that we can address those at the very end of the presentation, given that we have time allowing us to do so. So let's go ahead and let's jump right in here, and let's start talking about that first point there, and what that is, understanding and being able to leverage a clear single source of truth or a common data environment, why that's so important. Construction is a very collaborative process, but it's really still a very disconnected process in many ways. We see that you have different teams that are participating during the different phases of a project, whether that be during design, pre-construction or coordination, then during the execution phase, as well as into the owner handoff phases. And what we also see is that in many cases, these teams are using different files or different tools to prepare, possibly design information, possibly just to prepare the project documentation as well. And also we see that a lot of people are using a lot of different methods to transmit and share that information with their project partners. And when we see that we're utilizing multiple solutions or different solutions between different teams, we really open up the door for the possibility of data loss, or the potential of not having the most up-to-date information associated with our projects. And that can be tremendously detrimental, whether that be from the standpoint of putting together bid or estimate documents that you do not have all of the current information as you're providing that bid package to a general contractor, possibly to an owner, and also possibly scenarios where you're out in the field and actually working and constructing the project in the field. And man, we hope we're not building off of old, outdated sets of plans, which could essentially result in a lot of rework if that's the case. So now I want to kick it over to Lisa. She's going to talk about some of the negative consequences that we see when a single source of truth or a common data environment is not being utilized, and some of the positive outcomes that can be realized once teams begin to really put that in place and starts to utilize that on projects more and more.
Thanks, Kyle. All right. So negative consequences. Well, we often miss key information and deliverable dates, and that's really just because of what Kyle was hitting on, right? When people are working in different spaces and not information sharing, then we often forget to inform certain people of maybe changes or when things are due. And so there's just a miscommunication and misalignment there. We also, because of that, tend to have schedule and budget overages, right? So if we're not aware of what's due and when it's due, and we're not aware of all of the project information, then we often run behind or run over on our projects because we don't have that full line of sight, which also leads us to doing a lot of repetitive work. If we don't have all of the information in front of us, then I kind of have to piece it all together. And when I find new things out, I make changes, but that lends me to doing a lot of repetitive work that I probably could eliminate by having all that information initially. We're also working off of obsolete information. So if we don't know everything and we don't know all the information that's available to us, and we're working off of what we have, but that might not be the current version. And that then again leads into that repetitive workspace. But when we do have a common data environment, then our projects are completed on time, because again, we have that direct line of sight into all of the project information that we need. And that leads us into a consistent flow of project evolution. So if we think about, every time the project gets handed over to a new team or a different stakeholder, if we are not working off of a common data environment, then typically we take about 10 steps backwards, because that new group of people needs to kind of consolidate and find all the information. But if we're working in a single source of truth, right, we can just continue on with a positive trajectory. We also have more confidence in project information because we can see it all. We understand what's a new version and what we should be working off of. So we're more sure that we're working off of, the most relevant information. And that leads us to win more work and just have an overall better brand and reputation, because we're having more successful project outcomes.
Absolutely, Lisa. And great points that you called out there. So on this next slide here, I've captured some screenshots from within two of the different Autodesk Construction Cloud modules. And so we're looking at, on the left-hand side of the screen, this is from within the Docs module, or our document management module. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at this view from within the Build module. And so that's the module that you would see most of our field teams utilizing for completing work out in the field and tracking the work that they're doing out in the field, capturing information through checklists, punch lists, things of that nature. But as you can see, regardless of which module that a user may have access to based on their participation within the project, you can see that files area, which is our common data environment within the Autodesk Construction Cloud, it is 100% the same between those different modules. So even if somebody is working within a different phase of the project, or possibly working with different tools that their teams are utilizing on the project, those teams are all connected across the different modules and across the information that has been uploaded to the project and is being utilized for the project. So again, as you can see there, regardless of the module, the folder structure and the files that are contained within the folder structure is all the same. And again, showing you that we have that clear single source of truth within the Autodesk Construction Cloud environment there. So next, let's talk just a little bit about controlled file sharing. So it's great that we're able to have that single source of truth, that common data environment, but we also need to understand and have that peace of mind in understanding that we can control at a couple of different levels how users are able to access files, or how your teams are able to share files with either other team members on the project, or possibly even share files or documents outside with people that are not working inside of the Autodesk Construction Cloud project itself. So that's so important, because again, we want to make sure that everybody has access to the information that they need, but they may not need access to every piece of information on the project. So that's why controlled file sharing is so important. It gives teams the ability to really protect the information that is internal to their teams, but then also share out the information that's necessary for all project teams as a whole. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Lisa again to talk about some of the negative consequences when we don't have controlled file sharing in place, as well as some of the positive outcomes that can be achieved when we do.
Super. Thanks, Kyle. All right. So when we don't have access to controlled file sharing, people see information that they shouldn't, because we tend to send information out in a mass way, because that's much quicker than sending individual files to individual people. And so we tend to send too much, right? We can't privatize all of that information. And so people are getting a line of sight into things that maybe are not relevant to them, but also things that we're trying to privatize from them. When we also send information out in this way, tends to be that links or access to those pieces of information don't ever expire. So sometimes I just want to send, somebody a file, and I only want them to be able to view it for a couple of days. And then it's either going to be irrelevant, or it's going to be obsolete now, or I only want them to look at it for a couple of days. But if we're using kind of traditional methods, maybe just sending an email to them, right, then they have unlimited access to that. And that's probably not what I want. We also tend to send information out in siloed ways. What I mean by that is that if we are sending things out in emails, I don't really have confirmation that someone has read it. I don't have confirmation that it didn't just go to their junk folder and get overlooked. And that takes us back to, people potentially working off of obsolete information and having to do repetitive work. But when we do have access to controlled file sharing, then we can share with just the people that we want to choose, and we can share what we want specifically with those people. We don't just have to kind of lump everything together and send it out to everyone. We can also share for just as long as we want. So as I mentioned just a second ago, if I only want to share a couple of documents with folks for a week or a couple of days, then I have the ability to do that. So I have a lot more control and flexibility when I have access to controlled file sharing. We also can share in a way that people are going to see it. So, we can share in a way that we're kind of getting receipts of who's received these things or not. And that's really valuable, because if somebody comes back and says, I never saw this revision, so I've been working off of this older revision. You kind of have that proof, right? That says, well, I sent this on this date. You have that timestamp or that audit trail, and that can come in really handy for those kinds of conversations.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. So on this slide here, team, I've got a brief video, and we're going to talk about in this video is going to show 3 different methods that we have the ability to control file sharing within the Autodesk Construction Cloud platform. And so again, the 3 different ways we're going to be looking at in this video are going to be through folder-based permissions. Secondly, we're going to look at the way that we can share files, and again, share files either with people on the project or people outside of the project, and control that with expirations. And then lastly, we'll talk about transmittals. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Again, this first example is how we can manage permissions at the folder level for the different project partners that have been invited into our project. And so we have the ability to set permissions based on an individual user, a company that's on our project, or even based on a role. So as you can see here, I'm setting up some different role-based permissions to this particular folder here. And so we can see that in this case here, the architects would have edit capabilities into that folder and that file, but the electrical engineers would only have view capabilities. So again, we can definitely control that through the permissions. The next way is through the share functionality. So as you can see right here, we have the ability to share with any project member, or we had the ability to share with a public link, and we can share at either a folder level or at an individual file level. So right here, you can see that I'm turning on to be able to share this with anyone that has links. So this would be how we could share outside of our project. You can see that we have an expiration date that is associated with that link. So as Lisa mentioned, we can give access only for a limited amount of time if necessary. In this case, the third and final way that we can control file sharing is through the use of the transmittals and building out transmittal packages within the docs module itself. So as you can see in this example, I'm just coming through and I'm selecting some documents that are important for the transmittal that I'm putting together right now. So in this case, this might be a transmittal coming from an architectural team. So we've got some architectural based files there. But again, anybody on the project would have the ability to create a transmittal and either assign that transmittal and share it with individual users, or again with roles or companies on the project. So as you can see there, we just identify our files that we want to have included with the transmittal. We then give that transmittal package a name, and then we select the individuals or the teams or roles that need to have access to that transmittal. And then we hit to complete that, and it sends that transmittal out. And as you can see there, each team member, each recipient will receive an email when the transmittal is completed in this case here. So again, those are 3 ways that we can control file sharing within the Autodesk Construction Cloud environment. Okay, so next let's talk for just a few minutes about visibility into issue responsibility. One of the key features within the Autodesk Construction Cloud platform is our ability to not only create issues for the project, but also manage those issues. Okay, and so that is so important that we have the ability to quickly create an issue, whether that is because we see an issue when we're reviewing construction documents. Maybe we see an issue when we're reviewing spec sheets or submittals, spec documents or submittal cut sheets, or possibly we're out on site and we see an issue that's taking place during the construction process. Having the ability to quickly and easily create an issue and assign that issue to someone on the project team, whether it's an individual or whether it's a team, company as a whole, or even a role associated with people invited into that project. That's so important, because now not only are we calling out the issue, but we're also putting that issue in someone's hands for them to provide feedback that would help you to bring that issue to resolution. And that is so important, because creating an issue is not enough. It's also about being able to track issues, understand who's responsible for those issues, and ultimately work towards answers that lead to resolutions. And so let's talk a little bit, Lisa, about some of the negative consequences when we do not have a level of visibility into issues and who's responsible, and then the positive outcomes when we do have that in place.
For sure. So when we don't have access to issue visibility, issues don't get resolved. What we do now is I might send someone an email and say, okay, I need this redlined, or I need this picked up. But that's as far as that goes. I'm essentially just trusting that person to make that change. But what will happen is there's not a lot of accountability or transparency attached to that. And so those changes often don't get made, leading me into there's no transparency into who's working on what or what the status is. So not only do I kind of just send my requests to somebody via email or in passing when I see them, I also don't have a full log of who's responsible for what and where they are in the progress or process of completing that. And that can be not only hindering to me as the person assigning issues, but to the rest of the team. If somebody else's work is dependent on these revisions getting picked up or these issues being mitigated, they need to have a line of sight into where those issues are in terms of closing, so that they know when they can start working on their pieces of work. And then that lack of visibility causes more rework, right? And that's essentially what I was just saying, is that if I don't know that maybe Kyle is working on these 5 issues that are going to impact my work, and I continue working on my work, when Kyle makes those changes, my work has to be redone again, which is that rework, which causes us to get, above schedule and behind, or on schedule and budget, right? We kind of just start going off the rails with our projects. So that visibility is incredibly important. When we do have visibility into the different issues that live inside of our project, then we clearly understand where we are in terms of the issue closure. When Kyle's done with his issues, I can immediately start working on my project again, because I know that everything that I was waiting for has now been resolved. We also have confidence that appropriate revisions are being made. So we're not just kind of assigning issues to the wind now. We see who's responsible for what, where they are in terms of closing those things, and we're confident that those changes are actually getting made. If they're not, if we don't see the issue statuses changing, then we know who to go reach out to talk about those things. And then we can hold people accountable in that way. So just really throwing Kyle under the bus. If I see that he's got 20 issues that haven't even been looked at in the past 2 weeks, I know that I can go directly to him and kind of inquire as to why we're at a standstill there. So that added accountability and transparency is really key to successful project outcomes.
Absolutely. And, Lisa, that Kyle guy, he typically tends to be a lot of problems on projects.
He is.
Yes, without a doubt. But even more important to this is obviously being able to manage issues on a per project basis are key to, as Lisa mentioned, staying on schedule and within your budget. But then what's also just as important is having a level of analytics that you can pull from the system and possibly, create different templates within Power BI to really start to look at projects as a whole across the board to see, do we have specific teams that we're working with where we see a higher level of issues or a longer response time in getting issues resolved. And then we had the ability and we had that insight as a firm to make the decision of, is working with this partner worth the additional time that's necessary for them in resolving these issues, or potentially not getting an issue answered at all. And so again, you have that ability to really understand who are your project partners that make life easy when you're working on projects, and who are those partners that, even though you may have been working with them for a while, are they really potentially leading to projects running longer than expected, or turning in over budget when it's all said and done, due to just that lack of information when it comes to getting questions, or in this case issues, answered and resolved there. So that's just as important. So on the next slide here, we're going to talk a little bit about, and I've got a short video showing how you have that visibility into issues within the Autodesk Construction Cloud. And so in this example, you can see we're within the Docs module, but we do have this Issues tab within Build, just like we have the Files tab in both Docs and Build. But as you can see right here, you can very easily see as you're looking at your unified issue list, who those issues are assigned to. Are they assigned to an individual, or are they assigned to a firm that we're working with? Also, you can see just beside the assignee's name that we have due dates there. So when is that issue due to be resolved? And so we can track that as well. We can go into any one of our issues and we can see all the details related to the issue. We can also see any references that may have been added to the issue as additional context that would help to provide an answer and help to get that issue resolved and be able to move forward. Something else, though, that I would call out here as well that is not shown in that short video is not only the ability to, again, manage these issues from the unified issue tab, but also the ability to create reports and actually have these reports set up to generate and essentially email out to yourself or to other project team members on a regular basis, whether that be daily or possibly multiple times a week, so that you would get an email and you've built out a customized report that's just showing you issues that are related, that are possibly assigned to you or assigned to the firm that you work for, or possibly you just want to look at issues that you as an individual have created to understand where those are at. So we can create multiple different customized reports or configured reports, and then also have those scheduled to run automatically throughout the course of the project, so that gives people the ability to better manage those issues overall. And again, whether those are issues that are being assigned to them or to their firm, or issues maybe that they have created for other teams as well. So those reports and the ability to set those reports up and schedule them can be very handy from that perspective as well. Okay. So to this point, team, I wanted to just pause and take a look at some of the different Autodesk Construction Cloud modules that we've been discussing to this point on the webinar so far. And so at first, we started out, we've been talking a little bit about Autodesk Docs. Docs is really that base layer of the Autodesk Construction Cloud platform. Again, that is where you have that common data environment in your file repository. And again, it's a very, very valuable tool for managing document control, also managing document versioning, as well as being able to put in review and approval workflows, so that we're not just throwing information up there. We can also set that up in a way so that we have folders and we can put documents through a review process and know that what we're looking at has been approved by stakeholders or by project managers for use by field teams as well. And next, the other module that we've been talking about today is Autodesk Build. And as I mentioned earlier, Build is that module that we see being utilized mainly by teams out in the field or by project managers as a whole. Again, some of the different key things that we can do within Build is look at the management of the project from the standpoint of RFIs and submittals. We can better manage quality through checklists and punch lists, as well as safety through checklists and punch lists. And we do have the ability to leverage cost management within the Build offering as well. So again, not only making sure that we are seeing the project through from the execution aspect, but also being able to make sure that we can stay in tune with the financial health of our project based on the agreed upon budgeting that's been put in place, and also based upon payouts to our different project partners, and also looking at recognizing how potential change orders may be impacting the project and who's responsible for those change orders, whether that be, contractor responsibility or owner responsibility possibly as well. So again, those are the two different modules that we were talking about from the Autodesk Construction Cloud. And now we're going to move into and talk about a couple of modules from within the Autodesk Construction Solutions portfolio. And so Lisa is going to be talking us through the next couple of slides, and also through a little bit of a demo talking about Building Connected in BidBoard Pro as well as Assemble. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. All right. So as Kyle mentioned, we are going to take a little bit of a deep dive into Building Connected, specifically Bid Board Pro, as well as Assemble for focusing on work and place tracking. So the first place we'll kind of stop at is Bid Board Pro. Now, Bid Board Pro lives inside of the Building Connected platform, which is why this says Building Connected on the screen. But the program inside of Building Connected that we are going to look at is Bid Board Pro. And that's essentially a really fantastic way to kind of automate the bid management process. We can bring bids in a number of ways. You might manually create a bid, or if you receive a bid through email, you can actually have it sent directly into this platform, along with all of the information that's included in that bid. So any scoping information, any documents, attachments, the walkthrough dates, all of the due dates for the different components of the bid would all be sent over. And from there, we can actually start to manage it. So we can assign somebody on your team to be responsible for that bid. That's really helpful to ensure that these opportunities don't just kind of fall between the cracks, right? And once we start kind of building out what our resourcing looks like, we can make a decision on whether or not this is a bid that we would like to actually bid on, or if this is something that we're going to pass on. Once we start, once we make that decision, so let's say that we decide that we're going to bid on it, we basically manage the rest of the process. We wait until we hear back from the GC and we say, did we win this? Did we lose this? We kind of just keep moving it forward. But what's really helpful about managing the bid in this single space is that we also are provided with analytics and insights from those opportunities so that we can make better decisions on future bids that we get to and see if these are things that we want to continue to bid on, or if we've had success with them in the past. So Kyle, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. All right, perfect. So Assemble, again, we're going to look at Assemble in the space of doing work in place tracking. So that's looking at our 3D model in a single space, looking at all of the quantities of the different components that live inside of it, and then being able to colorize those different components to understand what's been installed versus what has not been installed, and looking at that on both our desktop, so on our computer, but also out in the field on our iPad. And with that, Kyle, I think we can just go ahead and hop into the platforms.
All right, there you go, Lisa.
Super. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. 1 second. Okay. 1 second here. Okay. Let me know, Kyle, if you can.
Yes, I can see your screen now.
Oh, perfect. All right. So we've got about 25 minutes. I'm going to try to spend about 10 minutes in here and the next 10 or 15 in Assemble. So again, this is Bid Board. It lives inside of the Building Connected platform, but we're going to be looking at Bid Board to do our bid management. So the first thing that we see here is that we are in the undecided bucket. This is where all of your bid opportunities go before you've decided if you're going to accept them and work on them, or if you are going to pass on it. So these can come in a number of ways. You'll see that down here, this bid opportunity says manual. So that means that this is an opportunity that I maybe heard about through word of mouth, and I came in and I filled out all of the key project information. We also can add bid invites coming from our email, right? So if we receive a bid invite from a general contractor, we can directly forward that invite into this space, which is what, these are in here, and all of the project information from that bid invite email will be put into that opportunity. So to hop into one of these opportunities, just to show you what it looks like, when we click on it, we'll see kind of like a little bird's eye view, but we could actually go ahead and expand that entire opportunity. So this is where we'd see all of the project dates, the due date, the expected finish, all of this information. Now, again, this is getting automated if I'm forwarding an email in. This is all being brought in for me, but if any of this changes, I do have the ability to come in and edit that information so that I can see the reflected correct date in here too. Okay. If I scroll down, I see what type of project this is. I can give it a number if I want to. I can see, what project it's associated with, what trade it's associated with, all of this information. And again, this is information that's typically coming in from the general contractor. If I happen to find out what other organizations are going to be working on this project, then I can fill this information out too. I don't need to, but as I mentioned, we get a lot of good insights and analytics from having these opportunities built out as much as possible. So this is information that we might be able to leverage in the future. If there's an architect that we have a really good relationship with previously, and we can find that from our archive of projects in here, then that could potentially give us an upper hand on this opportunity. Over on the right-hand side, we see information that's for internal use. So what that means is that this is private to your organization, and it's essentially just here to help you with resourcing. So if we scroll down here, we can see, what office from your organization owns this, what's the market sector, is there a priority, how many estimating hours do you think this will take, the win probability. Again, really good information for you to just have, so that when you go and look at your insights, you might say, okay, we have, a new project that I think is similar to something that we've done before. How many hours did we estimate that project was going to take before, right? And that's going to help save us a little bit of time. We can basically leverage information off of previous bids that we've sent out. So again, all of this is private for your organization. It's just really helpful to leverage for future opportunities. You also have an activity bar in here too, so you can see who from your organization has been working on this bid and what they've been doing. So again, that just really helps with transparency and letting everyone kind of have visibility into who's been working on what with this opportunity. So if we look at this and we decide, yep, this is something that we definitely want to bid on, what we would want to do is add somebody from our team to be the assigned person for this opportunity. And again, we want to do that to just ensure that this doesn't fall, between the cracks. So I'm assigned to this opportunity, but if I wasn't, I could, see the other people on my team and I could assign that person. What will happen then is they'll get a notification that they've been assigned this opportunity. And as it kind of goes through the process, they'll continue to get notifications. But this is how we hold somebody responsible for ensuring that this bid gets processed. So once we have decided that this is an opportunity we want to bid on, we're just going to click bidding, right? So from here, again, if we want to use this private tracking information, that we can. If I want to associate a priority with this or an ROM, I certainly can do that, but I don't have to. And again, that's just going to be private for my organization. From here, I can save this. And now if we go back into the undecided tab, we see that that opportunity is gone because it's been moved into the accepted tab here. So now we see it here. Now, the next thing that I would basically want to do is click back into it. I would go into the bid form here. I would fill this information out. It's going to be sent to the person that generated this opportunity, right? So the general contractor's email is going to be in here. I can put in the value for the bid. I can change the subject if I want to. I can put in a message. And if I want to put any additional proposal documentation in here, I certainly can. But once I'm done with this, we'll go ahead and send it. Now that's then going to get sent off to the general contractor. I'm not going to send it just because it's in my demo environment, but know that when I go ahead and send that, I'm also going to get a prompt to choose a follow-up date to reach out to that general contractor. Why we want to do that is so that we don't lose line of sight about checking in on this opportunity. And we want to let that person or that organization know that we are very, very interested in it. So we'll choose that follow-up date and we'll see where that plays into in just a second. But this is essentially the process for accepting a bid. And so once you've done that, you've submitted it, right? So then this opportunity, if I had actually sent it, would live in the submitted bucket up here. So again, we're kind of just going across the line up here. So now we've got our submitted opportunities in here. We can see what the value of the proposal is that we sent in. We also see that follow-up date that I mentioned we would be prompted for. If you ever want to change that, you can. Anything that has a pencil next to it is something that you can edit. And now this opportunity will just live in here until we hear back from the general contractor on whether or not we won this opportunity. So the very last thing that we would want to do in here is just to change the status. Okay, so did we win? Did we lose? Or is there some other situation? Again, we just want to leverage these so that we have the right information in our analytics. And when we're looking at previous projects, we can get a clear understanding of what the actual situation was. If we won this opportunity, right, we're going to select one here. We're going to go ahead and save it. And then that opportunity is going to move into the one bucket. These can live here as long as you want them to. If you lost an opportunity or some other situation, that opportunity will not get deleted. It will simply live in the archived tab so that you can look at the information that was associated with that project, at another time. When you're done with these projects in here, again, we would just go ahead and change the status. I'm sorry, not change the status. We would go ahead and archive them. So that's just going to move them into the archive bucket, but that's just so that our one bucket is not massively overwhelming. And that's essentially the process. So everybody has a line of sight into what opportunities you're working on. When we're done with these opportunities, we can go into the analytics here. Okay, and this tells us what our office has been doing, how we've been performing, how many bids we put out, how many we've won, what's our hit rate. We scroll down here, we can look at this year's too. That was last year, so we can look at this year's too. We can also get a good line of sight into our active opportunities. So these are basically just showing the different buckets that we went over and telling us how many opportunities live in this space. This can be really helpful because sometimes the undecided can just become a lot. And I like to come in here and see, oh my gosh, there's 100 undecided opportunities. That's something that we need to, we need to get some eyes on. We need to do something there. So I think this view can be very helpful. You also have some insight into who from your team has been winning a lot of opportunities. So that can be a nice, fun internal competition that you have going on too, and what clients you've really been winning with. The last thing that I want to show in here is reports. So reports essentially shows you all of the opportunities that you have worked on. So here I've just got a report of some of the opportunities that we have. Now, what's helpful here though is if you have a lot of opportunities that you've historically worked on, you can start to filter these out. So you might say, I only care about opportunities that were associated with the mechanical industry. And I also care about the location and the size and the type and the client, right? And that's why leveraging that historical information is really helpful, because if I can look at a bid that we did previously for a similar size project to something that we're looking at now, and I can pull the resourcing information that we got from that, then I don't have to do that on this future project. That's going to save me a lot of time, especially if that's a project that we won in the past. How did we successfully win that, and how can we replicate that on future projects? So this type of information is incredibly helpful. And I think that that is what we will cover today in bid board, because I do still want to get into assemble. So if you do have more questions on bid board, I know that Kyle will be able to answer those and have more in-depth calls with you as well. But hopefully this kind of gives you just a little bit of line of sight into what we can do in terms of bid management. From here, let me stop sharing and reopen. I'm going to open assemble now. So give me just one second here. Let's see. Shut down on me. I apologize. All right. Okay, let me share this screen again. Okay, so this is Assemble. If you've not heard of Assemble, it is essentially a 3D model conditioning platform, but it really is helpful in terms of work in place tracking, which is what we're going to look at very quickly today. So in Assemble, I would essentially connect my Revit model to Assemble, right? And once I've done that, I can hop into that model here, and we can see that it's broken down into the different trades. So I've got all of my structural components here, my architectural, my mechanical components. And in the middle here, I've got views that I might save. So, if maybe if we were doing plumbing and I just want to see all of the different piping that I have going on in this project rather than the entire building, which can be really overwhelming, then I can basically remove all of the stuff that I don't want to see and just look at the component types that I'm interested in. I could save that as a view so that when I come in here again, I can quickly access that and I don't kind of have to remake that view every time. So just know that that's what those are. One other thing that I want to mention is when we first start a project in here, we'll want to edit the project. And in here, this is where we could connect it to a BIM 360 project if we had our project information in that space. This is also where we can manage what we call assemble properties. So assemble properties are basically, these are our conditioning properties. These are the properties that lie on top of the 3D model properties. So these are things that we want to track on our own. It might be the installation status, it might be cost coding, things for estimating and budgeting. So these are all just different properties that you can create in here that will then show up in the model itself. So it's just kind of important that we set this up first before we start manipulating the model and putting information into that space. Okay, but let's pretend we've done all of that. We're going to hop into the mechanical space here. So again, this is just showing me the mechanical components of this massive 3D model that I've brought in here. Okay, so a couple of things that we are going to take a look at. open this up again, move this. Okay, so when we come into our mechanical space on the right-hand side, we're going to see the 3D model of those mechanical components. What we're seeing on the left-hand side is what's called our inventory panel. It's basically giving me the information about the different components over here. So what that means is I can zoom into my model here. I can click on a component that's highlighted for me in the 3D space, and it's also going to be highlighted for me inside of the inventory panel. So now that this is highlighted, I can scroll over, I can see the quantity, I can see the unit, I can see the volume, all of this good information. If I wanted to add additional columns in here, I can simply go into columns. And this is where I could maybe bring over some of those assemble properties. So if I want to start tracking the cost code, I can click that, and that's going to show up in the selected columns. If I want to bring over the installation status, I can click on that, and that's going to show up over here. Okay. We also could scroll down to where we would see, sorry, I hope that's not messing with anyone's eyes. Well, I must have missed it, but we have our assemble properties in here, and we also have the constraints or the model properties in here too, right? So we can pull those over, but whatever we're showing in the selected columns is what we're going to see in the inventory panel. So now that's updating for me to reflect those additional columns that I chose. We also can look at a 2D space in here too. So if I turn on my 2D sheets, this is all still connected. So for instance, if I click this component again, and if this component is something that lives in one of these 2D sheets, then I can simply go into these 3 lines here. I can go to selected, and it doesn't. So let me try this again. Okay, I won't keep doing this, but essentially, if this component also lived on a 2D sheet, it would tell me what sheet it lives on, and I would see it in this space too. But conversely, I can go into all of my sheets here. So maybe I'll just stick with this architectural site plan. That's not a good example. Let's go to this 3rd floor plan. I can go to this 3rd floor plan. I can zoom into it. I can click a component in here. Maybe, hopefully. I am in a mechanical drawing, so that was not a good example. Well, I'm not gonna. Okay, well, anyways, we could click a 2D component. That's also going to highlight for me in the 3D space, and it's also going to highlight for me in the inventory panel. So just know that all of these are they're all interconnected. And what's really valuable is sometimes people feel more comfortable working in a 2D space, and so they can totally do that in here. We don't have to have the overwhelm of working in a 3D space. If somebody feels more comfortable working in 2D, they can just be looking at all 3 different areas at one time to understand what that looks like. So let's go ahead and close the 2D, and we're just going to look at 3D and the inventory panel. The next thing I want to show you though over here on the left-hand side is the model tree. So again, right now we're just looking at the mechanical model, but if I want to look at the mechanical model together with the electrical model, maybe even with the plumbing model, I can turn these on, and the components that live inside of these spaces will generate into the inventory panel, and they'll also show up in my 3D space. That can be really overwhelming, which is why we're just looking at the mechanical model. But just know that if you want to look at everything together, or you want to look at different scopes of the project together, that you're absolutely free to do that. Okay, so that's what the model tree is there. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is properties. So again, if I click on one of these components here, I see what that is all about on the inventory panel, but I can go further into properties here. So in properties, again, there's 2 different types. There are our assemble properties, which are those kind of conditioning properties that we're bringing in, the things like installation status, the takeoff package, cost codes, all of that. That's totally up to you what you want to bring in and track in terms of assemble properties. But we also, if we scroll down, have the model properties. And we notice that we cannot change these. And that's because these are the constraints and characteristics coming in directly from the 3D modeling tool, right? So this is just for us to see, but this is really valuable because if I am in the field and I do have a question about this component, I can take a look at it without actually having to open up Revit or whatever tool we're using. So this is really helpful. And the fact that we can't change these, I think is kind of a nice safety net too. I can get the information, but I don't have a fear of anything being changed. Okay. So we'll go ahead and X out of that. The next thing that I want to show you really quickly, we'll unclick that. I'm going to grab all of the components in this space, and I'm going to go ahead and change the visibility. The reason we might want to do this is if the mechanical information in here is maybe just too much. We're looking at too much information and I want to silo it just a little bit. So we can click all of the categories, all of the components that live inside of this model and go into change visibility. And we're going to do what we call creating a rule. So when we create a rule, we can say, I only want to see the mechanical equipment. I only want to see things that correlate with mechanical equipment. If I want to add something else in here too, maybe I say mechanical equipment and ducts, right? I could grab that too, but we'll just leave it as, we'll just leave it as mechanical equipment. Okay, so let's do that again. So we're going to say leave it as mechanical equipment. Now I can get more specific too. I could say with a certain property, or I could say, just show me mechanical equipment that's on a certain floor, right? You have a lot of flexibility. You could say, I only want to see the ductwork that's on floor 2, right? You have the ability to say that. So we can go ahead and update this. Now what's going to happen is everything in my model that does not have the association of mechanical equipment has disappeared. So now I'm just looking at things that correlate with mechanical equipment. And that may be easier for me to kind of navigate around. If there's only a few things that I really care about in this model, then I can just get rid of everything else. Now we haven't actually gotten rid of everything else, right? But we're just hiding it. We've created a rule to not look at that other stuff in this instance. Now, when we first hopped into Assemble, I showed you these saved views. This is what we would do. Essentially, those people have created a rule where they just want to look at mechanical equipment. They would go ahead and save this view, and then this view would live inside of the model, and you could simply come back into this just to look at the information that you wanted to. If you decide that, okay, I actually want to look at everything, then we're just going to X out of the rule that we made and go ahead and update. And everything should come back for us. It has not, which I'm sure is user error on my end, but everything should come back for us and we'd be looking at that whole model again. So that's kind of how we set up views. Let me go back in here really quick and grab the whole model. I have turned something off. And to quickly get back in here, we'll just hop right back in. So the very last thing that I want to show you is work in place tracking. And essentially what we're going to do is colorize this model. So when we go through this process, it's just important that what we're grouping by is consistent in the inventory panel. So in this view and also in the colorization view that we're going to look at. So we want to change this because we're going to be doing installation status. We want to be grouping by installation status. Okay. And then the next thing that we want to do is go into color by property. We want to turn this on. But we notice that we're looking at installation status over here in our inventory panel, but here we're looking at category names. So we're still looking at the different types of components that live in this model. We want to update this to also be our installation status. So we're going to scroll down here, or actually just type in here, installation status. So now we see I've got 2 different types of installation. I've got installed or not installed, installed or not installed. So now we're colorized in that way. So what this does is it tells me what components of my model have been installed versus not installed. Now I'm on my desktop and I meant to log in with my iPad too, so I apologize for not doing that. On my desktop, I can go in and I can grab these individual components. I can go into their properties, and in the assembled properties up here, I can simply change the installation status to either be installed or not installed. So let's just pretend that this is not installed. And I go ahead and save this. And now that's reflected in the model. This is not installed. But if I were on my iPad, I could mass select a ton of these components at one time. So let's say we're on site and we've gotten a lot of stuff done today and installed. I can grab a ton of these components at one time. I can simply update their installation status in a mass effort. And then when I go into see what's been installed versus what's not been installed, I have a really good line of sight into that. I can understand, where we still have to go versus what we've done. I can even pull out the quantities of this and export that into an Excel spreadsheet if I want to give just, more insight and maybe share that information with other people. So we can see that I can really drill down into what has been installed, right? So in the crawl space, we've got some mechanical equipment that's been installed. Well, what exactly has been installed, right? And then this is where if we want to get more in depth, we just go back into columns here and we bring in more properties that we're wanting to track in terms of installation. And then once we've got this built out the way that we want to, we can simply export that into an Excel file so that we can share that with other people. But this, especially in the field on your mobile device, on your iPad, is incredibly helpful to just understand what you've done and where you still have yet to go. And getting those quantities in here and those unit measurements are also very, very helpful. So that's just something that we wanted to show you today, really, again, looking at bid management. But once you've won that project, how do you actually manage the project and understand, where you are and what has yet to be done. So with that, Kyle, I will hand it back over to you.
All right, great. No, thank you so much, Lisa. That was some great stuff there. And Assemble is one of those products that continues to amaze me with all of the capabilities that it does have available and is built in there. And it's a product that can really do a lot of things for people. And one of the things, just in looking at that inventory list, to know that you can load that Revit model in, and boom, it's automatically pulling those quantities out based on those different categories. That's a huge piece in and of itself. But then once we start looking at ways that we can leverage it further downstream from things like we were talking about today with that work in progress tracking or work in place tracking, that's a game changer for a lot of people. Okay, so thanks so much for showing us that. So with that, team, we're going to move into kind of our wrap up slide here. And so we want to talk about some of the key differentiators with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you for this part.
Sure. Yep. So we've got 4 different differentiators that we're going to look at really quickly. The first is that unified data. So that's really been the theme of so much of our conversation today, is working in that same space so that we're all collaborating and working off of the same information, so that we're not running behind on schedule and over on budget, and we're not having to do a ton of rework on our projects. Also having those business insights. So we looked at those, specifically in Building Connected, but when we run most of our project in the same space, we're going to get insights into how we're performing, and that's information that we can replicate and use again on future projects. Also have enterprise grade, and so this means being able to manage the entire organization with the same platform, building out templates, being able to manage different permission settings and things like that. So kind of having an overarching ability to manage the account or the organization as a whole. And then pervasive simplicity. So everything that we looked at today, I'll give it to you that Assemble is a little bit more complicated, but if we really look at the platforms that Kyle was going over and Building Connected, they're meant to be simple. And the reason for that is that we want people to use it. We don't want you to adopt a new platform that people say, whoa, this is far too much. We're not going to spend time doing this. We know that you already have a job to do, and bringing on a new platform or utilizing a platform is another thing that you have to do. But when it's really simple and it makes your life easier, we know that we can be, all of us are more successful in that space because it's a software then that you want to use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so with that, team, we're right at the 1 p.m. mark, but if there are any questions, let us know. I noticed that we don't have any questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So if you do have any questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to your respective ATG rep, or you can also send in emails, general question emails to sales@atgusa.com as well. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Lisa, thank you as always for your assistance on these webinars. Certainly do appreciate that, and look forward to seeing everyone again on our next one. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.